Now that G2 won ESL Cologne and Vitality won that Gamers 8 tournament, I think it's a great time to look at what MOUZ are these CSGO pro players now using. We will look at all the players from the HLTV top 10 and a few players from Liquid and NIP. So let's go ahead and start from the Liquid roster, and the first player we look at is NAVI. In the previous video I made 6 months ago, he was using the VAXI XE wireless and now he's back on the G Pro X Superlight. Nothing that weird in the setup, a QCK heavy XL2566K. A custom keyboard is something that is quite rare in the professional CSGO scene, but that's basically it. OC has also changed his mouse since the last video and now he is using the Superlight. He has also switched to the Wooting 60HE, which is the most coded gaming keyboard. And just for fun, we're gonna have this text pop up every time there is a setup that has at least 3 or 4 good elements. Yekindar then again is still using the EC2 wireless, and overall there is nothing that weird about the setup. VAXI PA Black is a great alternative to the GSR. Let's move on to NIP and start with Config, and he is using the G Pro X Superlight. Overall I do not remember if he was part of the last video, but his setup seems to be very good as well. Hampus then again is still using the Razer Deathter Elite. And in terms of the setup, nothing really surprising for some team that is sponsored by Razer. Last one on NIP is going to be Hetrick, and in the past few months he has been quite insane. He's also using the G Pro X Superlight and the setup is quite basic. And then we are moving to the real top 10, so we have MOUZ. And let's start with Frozen. The Deathter V3 Pro Faker Edition, basically this one has an updated coding compared to the original V Pros. And overall the setup is pretty normal for a Razer sponsored team. Then we have Tor C, and he's also one of the very few ones still using a wired mouse, so the VAXI Outset AX, which is a great one of course. And nothing really new about the setup. Nice to see some Finnish blood in the top 10, and Yimpat is using the Razer Deathter V3 Pro. No surprises here. Xertion then again is using the EC1C, so again a wired mouse, and the EC1 is fairly rare in CSGO these days. And overall the setup is basically the same as the other ones. Moving on to NAVI, and of course we are going to start with Simple. Of course he is using the Superlight, and we have also seen some leaks about the Superlight 2 from Simple. So he's most likely using one already, and most likely actually most of the players that are on the Superlight in the top 10, especially the teams that are sponsored by Logitech, are already using the Superlight 2. Hopefully it comes out soon, I'm actually very excited about it. Nothing else in the setup has really changed, so he's still using the Hater mouse pads and Logitech keyboard and headset. Out of interest, I quickly wanted to check out his XL2566K settings, so he's using sharpness at 5 and no diac, so basically I'm using sharpness 10 and diac premium, so quite different from my settings. More Finnish players in the top 10, and now we have Alexi B. He is still using the G Pro X Superlight, he has been using that for a while. Overall quite standard setup. And Alexi is actually using Diacon Premium and also quite high sharpness settings, so maybe that's a thing for us Finnish people. Moving on to Bit, and he is still using the G Pro X Superlight. Still using the GSR as well. The GSR 2 is out and it's a much improved version of the original one, so he will most likely switch as well. Then we have IM or Ima, however you pronounce his name. He's on the Superlight, and actually more interestingly even, he's using the Artisan Zero X-Soft. Super nice to see Artisan pads in the CSGO scene. Last up in the team is JL, who is using the Deathter V3 Pro, so the only one in the team not using the GPX. And overall it's a standard setup again. Then we have Cloud9, which on paper is the best team on the planet. I've checked all of these players in the past, so I should know which mice they are using. Let's see if they have switched. Starting from Hobbit, and he is still using the same mouse as in the previous videos, so the XE wireless, and nothing too interesting in the setup. Then again, Electronic has switched, as he is now using the EC2 wireless, and in the past with NAVI he was at least using the Deathter V3 Pro and at some point the Superlight as well. Axel then again is also still on the wired mouse club, and he is using the EC2C. And again one more player with the G Pro X Superlight, so Shiro is using that one. Last up from Cloud9 is Perfecto, and he is still on the VAXI XE wireless. Next up on the 7th spot we have GamerLegion, and to be honest I do not know that much about these guys. Let's start from A-Core, and he is again using the G Pro X Superlight, and overall nothing new about the setup. Nieland then again is on the Death Adder V3 Pro, still seems to be using 1000Hz and still on 400 dpi, so has not gone with the 4000Hz yet at least. Kios then again has the EC2 wireless, and for his setup this is actually quite interesting. He's using the Pulsar ES1, which is very rare in CSGO, and also the Wooding 68G, which is of course the best gaming keyboard out. Moving on to Volt, and he's on the Superlight and a very low sensitivity it seems. And overall, nothing that interesting about the setup. Last up is Isaac, and he's using the Razer Death Adder V3 Pro as well, and still on 1000Hz, and the setup is quite normal, but it seems that more people have been switching on the Death Adder V3 Pro, at least at this point it seems like that. Then we are moving on to Astralis, which is a very interesting team for me, and I of course will want to start from device. And here is actually a mention of him using the GPX2. I'm not sure how we know that, I guess there has to be some leak somewhere. There is no mention of him using 2000Hz yet, so I guess his settings are not available. But this is actually fairly interesting. Other than the GPX2, the setup is not very interesting at all though. Let's check out his XL2566K settings, also diag off. Sharpness quite high though. Then moving on to BlameF, and also on the Superlight, most likely on the Superlight 2 as well, if device is already using that one. And Buzz is also on the GPX and basic Logitech setup. The whole team is pretty much the Superlight, as there is also using that one, same Logitech setup. Thank God we have some variants, as Borap is using the EC2, but the setup is pretty standard. Okay, and then it's time for one of my favorite teams, so FaZe. And let's start from Twists. He has been on the G Pro X Superlight for quite a while, but for the Gamers 8 tournament he actually switched on to the Death Adder V3 Pro, and it will be very interesting to see if he actually continues to use this mouse. In this report it says that he is using the 4000Hz, but still on 400 dpi, so it does not make that much sense. But I'm not sure if this is fully accurate. Now, one thing that I did not know is that he has gone on and switched to a wooden keyboard, and these are of course the best keyboards on the market for gaming. Nothing else that new or interesting about Twist setup. And Brokey then again is still using the GPX, and for his setup, I think the Saturn Pro is a new one, so previously he maybe was using the QCK or something, but nice to see some LethalGamingGear mousepads also in the CSGO professional scene. Moving over to Robs, and he also has not changed in a while, so on the EC2C wireless, and pretty much nothing new in the setup. I also want to check out Robs' XL2566K settings, Diacon Premium, Sharpness on 5, AMA high. And one player that has been on the GPX for a long time is Rain, and for the setup there is basically nothing new in that department either. Carrigan is also one player that has not switched his mouse in a while. He was one of the very first ones to switch up to the Death Adder V3 Pro, and he seems to be still using 1000Hz as well, and a basic setup. Alright, then we are moving on to G2, and here are some interesting changes, for example with Nico and Hunter. Nico is now using the Death Adder V3 Pro, and also according to this he's on 4000Hz, but still also on 400 dpi. And also the mousepad change is quite interesting, so he's also one of the players that is using an Artisan Zero Soft. Actually, sorry, the X Soft, and also he is using very good IEMs for gaming. So Hunter is now on the EC2C wireless, and he was on the Superlight the same as Nico, and otherwise the setup is standard. JKS was using the standard Death Adder V3 Pro, but he also seems to be using the Faker edition. Also 4000Hz, nice to see, but still on that 400 dpi, so not all the benefits are going to be there from the 4000Hz. No surprises really with Manesi, as he is still on the Superlight. He has been performing really well in the past 6 months or so. And no surprise in the setup either. Hooksy is also still using the G Pro X Superlight, and nothing really interesting about the setup. Then we are actually getting into the top 3, and the third team is ENCE, and let's start from Nerds. He is a player whose gear I've never checked before, and on the EC2C wireless, which seems to be very popular in CSGO at the moment, and otherwise fairly standard CSGO setup. D-High is also on the EC2C wireless, and okay, nice to see Artisan Zero X-Soft mousepad again and in orange color. CSGO players do seem to prefer the X-Soft base. Of course, it does provide you a little bit more control than the medium and even the soft one does. Son Payus is also a player who I have not checked before, and he is on the GPX. and the mousepad is the GSR. Madden is still also using a wired mouse, so on the EC2C, quite high EDPI, so fairly high sense. Waxy PA Assist mousepad and fairly standard setup otherwise. And last up is the IGL of ENCE, and he's also on the Superlight. ENCE is, by the way, sponsored by Logitech, so there is a good chance that some of these players are on the Superlight too, or maybe even all of them. For the mousepad, he is using the ENCE Logitech G640 and otherwise a fairly standard Logitech setup. Then the second best team, the top 10, so Heroic, and I do not expect many changes for the players from the past video that I made. Let's start with Cadian. I'm not at all surprised that he is still on the GPX, and on the setup there is nothing really new. Shoes is also still using the same mouse, so the EC2C wireless, and seems to be nothing new in the setup. Let's move on and we'll go with Stone, also still on the EC2C wireless and nothing new on the setup. Let's go ahead and move on. Jabby, EC2C wireless. Tesses is still on the Extrafly M4 wireless and nothing new about the other gear here. Then on to the first spot, which is Vitality, and Zaiwu, who is of course one of my favorite players at the moment. We will start with him. He has experimented quite a bit with mice. He was using the DeathAdder V3 Pro with 1000 Hz from what I hear, but now he is on the EC2C wireless. I think he was on this already in the last video. But yeah, some history with the DeathAdder V3 Pro. And this is where my camera ran out of battery, but yeah, nothing else new. The GP5 he has been using for a bit as well. MechKeys or Magisk, however you pronounce his name, he is still on the DeathAdder V3 Pro, now confirmed to be on 4000 Hz and at least 800 dpi, so there are more benefits than with 400 dpi. And Spinks also is on the DeathAdder V3 Pro, also 4000 Hz, but curiously 900 dpi, again a little bit more benefits than on 800, but pretty much none whatsoever. Nothing else new about the setup. Next up we have the new guy in the lineup, so Flames, and I know that he was using Outset AX in the past, but he has gone on with wireless mice and at the moment on the EC2C wireless. And overall the same setup as pretty much everybody else in the lineup or anybody with Extrafly sponsorship in their team. And moving on to the last player on the list, so this is Apex and he is still on the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro, still using 1000 Hz and nothing new about the setup. Actually, maybe this is new, but he is using the Rocket Shop Ninja mousepad, which is one of the slowest pads that I have tried. And the final thing to look at are the overall stats, and again the G Pro X Superlight is the most popular among these 50 players. And on the second place we have the EC2 wireless with 13 players out of 50 using it. And the third popular mouse is the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro. If you look at the changes since the last video about 6 months ago, the GPX basically lost 2 users, the XC wireless has lost 8 users, the DeathAdder V3 Pro gained 3 and the EC2C wireless gained 6 users. And then the last graph we're gonna look at is how many times these mice appear in the HLTV top 10 teams, and the winner is the EC2C wireless, being in 9 teams out of 10. Last time around the Superlight was used by 9 teams, and the DeathAdder V3 Pro by 6 teams, and the EC2C wireless by 6 teams, and the XE wireless also by 6 teams. And that's basically it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and see you in the next one.